Ladies and gentlemen, the closing session will begin in about 5 minutes, so please help us start on time by moving to your seats. Thank you.
Remember this? Spending half your day at CIF, drowning in paperwork, hoping you even know what you're missing? Yeah, we've all been there. But those days are over. The Army is dropping a game changer, SEAM. The soldier equipping and asset management tool is the one-stop shop for all your OCA needs. SEAM flips the script. Everything is online. Ordering, turn-ins, exchanges, no downtime, cloud-based. You can do it all from your computer or from your government-issued mobile device. Think about it. Flexible scheduling, book CIF appointments, any CIF, worldwide, anytime. Accuracy. Your OCA requirements are automatically updated in SEAM. And here's the big one. Pictures! SEAM has easy identification, meaning you can search by picture or keyword. And SEAM isn't just about convenience. It's about making sure you have the gear you need when you need it. And that stuff you want to get rid of? SEAM makes turning in gear as easy and as accurate and seamless as possible. Ready to ditch the frustration and upgrade your OCAE game? Head to seam.army.mil today. SEAM. Managing your gear made easy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford, U.S. Army retired, President and CEO of FCA International.
Hey, let them know. Hey, well, welcome back from the break. I hope you're all able to really get together and make some meaningful connections with your fellow attendees and exhibitors today and throughout the week, because that's really what this is about. It is now my pleasure to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Lieutenant General Paul Stanton. As the District Director, General Stanton manages a global network of more than 20,000 service members, civilians, and contractors who provide defense communication solutions to the President, Department of War, Secretary of War, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and combatant commanders. He is a 1995 graduate of the United States Military Academy and spent 20 years as an infantry officer before transitioning to the Cyber Branch in 2015. I know Paul is no stranger to this community, given the fact that he is a previous commanding general of the Army Cyber Center of Excellence, which he led from 2021 to 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome back home to Paul Stanton.
I don't know who picked that song. The Closer. Wow. That Paul Fredenberg just put that into context for me. I apologize up front. I'll do my best. General Crawford, sir, General Fredenberg, Mike, thanks to AFCEA for inviting me back home to Augusta, to TechNet, the opportunity to give a little bit of insight into things that we're thinking about from a joint perspective. I can tell you that it does my heart good to be back in the city of Augusta, to walk through these familiar halls, to see so many familiar faces. I'll apologize up front that the op tempo right now is pretty extreme for what we're doing in support of the Department of War. And it precluded me from getting down here any earlier. However, landed last night at about midnight to make sure that I had an opportunity to answer some questions from you after I provide a little bit of insight. So I know that we have talked through several fora and discussions, out sessions as part of the conference about the explosion of artificial intelligence into the cyberspace warfighting domain. I'll key on it a little bit. Undeniably, the character of war is changing. The speed, scope, and scale of AI-enabled operations is absolutely changing how we must operate. Speed. Frontier AI models can discover vulnerabilities exponentially faster than we were able to do with human analysis previously. Scope. Anything and everything. Cloud computing, servers, routers, OT. The totality of our operating space is subject to benefiting from artificial intelligence and scale across the entire globe, across the entire DOIN. How many routers do you think that we have in the DOIN? Okay, thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. Probably a router producer in the audience. We have a lot. So when we think about speed, scope, and scale, and what a combination of frontier AI models, large language models, agentic capabilities, when put together, it changes how we fight. When we change how we fight for a largely Army audience at the home of the Cyber Center of Excellence that thinks about dot mil PFP ramifications, we must adjust. If you change how you fight, doctrine, you have to change how you organize, how you equip, your TTPs, your training model, your leader development program. It all has to follow. And we are at this inflection point. Most people in this audience have read and analyzed what happened with Hugging Face a week, 2 weeks ago. Is that how we used to operate? Fundamentally different. And you cannot bury your head in the sand and not make adjustments according to a change in how we fight. When the Germans put together armor, the Luftwaffe, machine guns, and established blitzkrieg, they didn't build the tanks. They didn't design and come up with the concept of a tank. They didn't develop the concept of the airplane. They didn't invent machine guns. They put it together and redefined combined arms warfare. What I ask you to think about is, how do we put together large language models, frontier analysis, agentic capabilities at speed, scope, and scale in order to get the right data to the right place at the right time, such that we can make better and faster decisions than our adversaries. It requires us to rethink. But I can tell you, back to being home in Augusta, no better place to be than in and amongst the largely Army audience that innovates. Here we are at the home of the Cyber Center of Excellence, the home of Army Cyber Command, where I can tell you, through a joint lens, I might hold just an ounce of bias, but through a joint lens, the Army is innovating. The Army is moving out in solving hard problems. How do we make the right adjustments to account for the speed, the scope, and the scale? Something that I'm keenly concerned with and aware of is that the ability to unleash the capabilities of artificial intelligence require us to bound risk. Yes, we want to employ agentic capabilities in support of defensive cyber operations. But think about what an agent might do in the operating environment in terms of configuration changes, in terms of modifications. What are the downstream second and third order impacts of the change that has occurred? Put that in the context of who we are and what we do. We are warfighters supporting warfighting. The other end of that network circuit is a warfighting platform. It is a soldier with a software-defined radio. You can't make changes in the operating environment that potentially jeopardize troops in contact. So how do you balance the risk? We know we need to move with speed, scope, and scale. But we also know that we need to have the right controls in place in order to bound risk. There is your homework assignment. Solve that problem. Recognize that automation absolutely has to be central to our future. Agentic capabilities that you talked about yesterday must be central to our future. But put that into the context of warfighting decision-making and help us solve that problem. here's your first hint to the homework assignment. Standardization matters. If you are going to understand second and third order effects, you have to understand the operating environment. If the operating environment is so complex, made up of bespoke, unique solutions that you can't see, then you can't define the constraint model. And then you can't bound the risk. Forgive the analogies, but sometimes analogies hold. When you fight in the infantry, we have normalized the caliber of our ammunition so that different weapon systems can fire the same rounds. For good reason. Because two soldiers sitting in a foxhole might need to exchange ammunition. But then back that off and think about the logistics and the field trains. Somebody's got to load a truck full of ammunition and then get it to the front lines. If you have 30 different types of ammunition, you don't know what to put on the truck. Or worse yet, you load the truck with the wrong ammunition. And then for those sustainers in the room, think about the network of vehicles that are trying to move the logistics around in the lines of communication. If you've got the wrong ammunition going to the wrong spot, you start clogging up the pathways to the front line. Hopefully, all you nerds in the room are making the quick analogy to data, because the analogy holds. If our data looks completely different, we have different calibers of ammunition. And we're trying to load it onto our weapon systems. And we're trying to move it to the point where it needs to be, and we are experiencing congestion. We cannot afford that. Speed matters. When the enemy unleashes, when, not if, the enemy unleashes agentic capabilities against our operating environment, we do not have time to fight through network congestion because I don't know how to normalize data, or network congestion because I didn't standardize the architecture. We got to think about where we're going 2 hilltops away and innovate our way into the solution space now. I'll tell you, again, back at the home of innovation in the United States military in this warfighting domain, what we're doing with Next Gen C2 is spot on. We all want to get there faster, absolutely, let's go. But the design is 100% correct. Purposefully, vertically aligned through standardization, with data flows that are well understood. The right data to the right place at the right time, not all the data. Cognizant of bandwidth constraints. How much throughput do you need? How much compute capacity do you need? When is the next time in your maneuver that you're going to have the opportunity to synchronize your data? All of that thinking is inherent to the design of what the Army is doing. What we're doing in the joint community is developing the architecture for you to plug into. I use the analogy to Lego blocks all the time because I think it holds. You need composability. You need extensibility. But you need a degree of commonality. When you dump your Legos out onto the floor, you can connect them together in interesting ways because there's a standardized common interface for the Legos. And you can compose whatever you need or want based off of connecting the Lego blocks together. when you design the architecture that way, it supports the standardization that is an absolute requirement for a global fight. All of us, most of us, depending on how old you are, have lived through the challenges of moving from one theater to the next. Many of you graybeards in the room have reconfigured devices on Green Ramp. We can't fight that way in a global fight where speed, scope, and scale matter. There must be a degree of commonality, of standardization, that allows us to put the Lego blocks together so that when you bring a next-gen C2 Corps Headquarters and Infantry Division into PACOM, it snaps in. And when you go to CENTCOM, it snaps in. It doesn't do that right now, but it must in the future. And think about the context of fighting in a joint and partner-based environment. We will fight as part of a coalition. That coalition is going to bring their own box of Legos. Those Legos may or may not, they might be Duplo blocks. They may not fit exactly. So we at DISA have to define the right architecture to support that interoperability. That's what we are aggressively driving towards. Aggressively. Timelines matter. The reason that I missed my flight yesterday was because I spent the afternoon with General Rudd and Admiral Paparo, driving the architecture necessary for First Corps to headquarters to show up on an island of choice and connect in. An absolute requirement to account for speed, scope, and scale. Think about what standardization does in the context of training. I wonder who that is. It's probably my wife. When we've all spent time inside of a unit, it doesn't even matter what your background is. We've all spent time in a unit where somebody drops a new piece of equipment into the environment. And the degree of training that comes with that, there might be new equipment training that a vendor comes and helps educate on how it works. But the window of time for that new equipment training is relatively short. And then where does the vendor go? Goes away, and then the E5 and E6 in the unit are responsible for training that piece of equipment. With the rate of change of technology, it's going to be continuous. If the kit looks different everywhere you go, we're not going to achieve speed, scope, and scale. The degree of standardization helps us drive towards a training plan that allows us to get the reps and sets in order to move fast. Think back to your own experiences and the training that you've done. We all know crawl, walk, run. You go to the range and zero your weapon before you conduct the combined arms live fire. Same thing needs to apply inside of our warfighting domain. But if the kit is continuously changing and isn't standardized, then we are going to struggle as a joint force fighting in a coalition to achieve the competency necessary to move with speed. It's an imperative. Standardization also helps us drive towards a readiness model. Not just training, but think about the status of the equipment. I'll tell you that historically, we as a department have been horrible at maintenance inside of the cyberspace warfighting domain. About 45 days ago, I made POAM a bad word inside of DISA and DCDC. Legitimately, you can't say it to me. It's a trigger word. If you say POAM on the Ops Center floor, both the individual who said it and I drop for push-ups. POAM is an excuse. Somebody spends a couple minutes of time and energy putting together the checklist associated with the criteria for a POAM, arbitrarily selects 180 days as the time window, submits it, and forgets about it. How is that maintenance? And the only reason that they know that the 180 days has expired is because I called them on the 181st day to say, your POAM expired, what do you, and oh, yeah, no, you're right, I'm going to extend that for another 180 days. Tell me I'm wrong. And in the interim, we are incurring compounding risk inside the operating environment. That is not how we fight in any other domain. There are windows of time where our capabilities must be presented into the fight. Every former commander in this audience understands what I mean when I say we could circle X a vehicle and push it into the fight. There are reasons why you can have a command override. But here's what happens, and I'll hearken back to mechanized infantry in a Bradley fighting vehicle. If you're in combat, something is wrong with the vehicle, commander could take the 5988 Echo, I'm dating myself, circle exit, and push it into the fight. But what happens behind the scenes when that happens? The part is on order, it's being moved into the UMCP, the wrecker is prepared in case the vehicle dies, the mechanics are in a low hover waiting for the vehicle to return, and as soon as the warfighting platform is out of no longer in contact, it's back into maintenance in order to be fixed. And that's just culture. We understand that. We have been circle Xing the network into perpetuity without ever going back to actually do the maintenance. Hiding underneath the umbrella of a POAM. Oh, I got a POAM. That doesn't work. Moreover, you're taking your risk and imposing it onto the adjacent units. Because the risk inside of a networked environment can move laterally, a lot easier than crossing an operational boundary from a maneuver unit. If the warning light on a UH-60 goes off while you have troops in the back moving to the objective, what happens? I don't know in every case, but I'll tell you, in my case in Iraq, the helicopter landed and we got off. And eventually, a new bird came in and we made it to the objective. But when the warning light goes off inside of our network environment, what do? Pass salt and pepper, and the alert just went off again. I know, we're good. I was in the Amsterdam airport, it was probably a couple years ago now, and I was in a layover, and we had been on a red eye, everyone's exhausted. We're sitting there just kind of droning out. And someone opened one of the doors to the flight line. And the alarm starts wailing, right? Lights are flashing, the alarm is sounding. And what did we do? Sat there in a drone, doing absolutely nothing. And I said to the folks that I was with at the time, I said, you know what, it scares me that somewhere in a network operations center, something similar might be happening. That can't be the case. We have got to understand the context of the alerts, put them into the context of how the enemy is attempting to gain access into the environment. Understand the mission for which the network was put into place, for which we're moving data, such that we can optimize, prioritize, and move with speed. We must treat maintenance of our operating environment as maintenance, not as POAMs. Another personal pet peeve. We pawn the heck out of everything. There's a reason for having a period of non-disruption. But you don't have to draw the pond around the entire AOR. Do the technical analysis to figure out what actually can't be modified over a window of time so that you can perform command maintenance on your weapons platform in conjunction with continuing the fight. And when that mission, that task, tactical task, has been executed, then get the network back into the UMCP and do the maintenance. That's cultural change. But it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, the risk that you are inheriting and accepting is extended to others. So as we drive in an era of speed, scope, and scale enabled by artificial intelligence that we know our adversaries are doing their best to weaponize, we must posture. How are we going to put AI together? Through large language models, agentic capabilities, frontier analysis, into our workflows, into our operations, combined in support of warfighting combatant commanders and commanders at echelon as they execute their movement and maneuver. How are we going to standardize our architecture while still exposing extensibility, composability, such that commanders can fight? Where's the sweet spot between what must be common and what still gives commanders at echelon the ability to move and maneuver according to their operational requirements? How are we going to evolve our training so that we stay current? And ultimately, how are we fundamentally going to change our culture so that the warfighting domain of cyberspace is on par with other warfighting domains in the minds and decision cycles of our key leaders? From a Cyber Defense Command, Defense Information System Agency perspective, we are tackling those problems from a joint and partner-based environment in support of combatant commands. I know that the Army is working those problems at core and below. Let's make sure that the interface of the Lego blocks is designed appropriately so that we snap them together when a U.S. Army Corps is presented as forces into theater in order to fight on behalf of a geographic combatant commander. Okay, what are your questions?
With respect to the standardization topic, what is the one area industry should focus their attention on to help?
So, hard question to answer, because when I think about my responsibilities as the DISA director, I have a transport layer, I have hosting compute, I have enterprise services that I'm responsible for in a global context. The means by which to standardize in our routing infrastructure is a little bit different than the means by which to standardize our host and compute architecture, is a little bit different than how we standardize our enterprise services. So I'll flip the question and say that within a technical horizontal slice of the operating environment, we need to drive towards the standardization. I'll tell you that where we are putting a lot of current attention as DISA is towards the standardized gateway architecture to support a multi-partner environment. We know that we're going to fight as a coalition. I submit that we don't know who the members of that coalition are ahead of time, and that the members of the coalition are highly likely to change through the execution of operations. Recent historical examples validate those assumptions. If that's the case, we have to have a designed and standardized architecture that allows us to incorporate a coalition partner that we didn't previously know was going to be part of the coalition into the operating environment. So we at DISA are focused in on helping to design that standardized gateway that allows us to incorporate data sets from foreign partners, joint community as well, to then aggregate, correlate, analyze in accordance with the warfighting functions. So while industry must look at the standardization across horizontal slices of the operating environment, putting elements of those together into a gateway architecture in support of the multi-partner environment is where we're focused at as DISA. Other questions, please.
So we had several sessions this week on post-quantum cryptography. At what point do we move from discussion, experimentation to implementation? And given the scale of the enterprise, how do you see us prioritizing which systems and data we migrate first?
Now. So I think you have to clarify what you mean when you say post-quantum cryptography. We know that there are algorithms that are exposed to risk in a post-quantum era. We need to change those algorithms now. We're doing that. We know that we need to secure those algorithms inside of the right devices such that the algorithm itself and the device which runs it are secure. We're doing that now. I think that there's more room for thinking about the implications associated with post-quantum effects. What does it do to the size of your data set? When you add more bits and bytes, it changes the volume. If it changes the volume inside of the running algorithm. It changes it inside of the cached storage hierarchy. It changes the volume and capacity inside of the underlying storage hierarchy. So while there are certain things like refactoring the algorithm, check, moving, already on the march. Housing that algorithm, check, already on the march. I think that there are considerations, broader considerations about volume and velocity and associated bandwidth and capacity that are part of the calculus that we have to incorporate into our thinking. I'll build off of that thread for a second, switching off of the focus on post-quantum cryptography, but switching to a discussion about computation at the edge. We know we need it. What does it need to be? How are we thinking about what algorithms need to run at the edge? But it's not what algorithm needs to run. What problem are you solving? What questions do you need to ask of edge compute in order to support what decisions, in order to support what functions? You have to do that analysis to then determine what the capacity is that you need forward. A T4 chip is orders of magnitude less expensive than an H200 chip. It requires orders of magnitude less power, but they're still a chip. And they both support AI. But AI in what context? Are you using LLMs to help you do orders processing inside of the TOC? Or are you cranking large data sets to hit big bullets with little bullets in a joint fires context? The compute requirements are very different to solve those two different problems. But it's both edge AI. So thinking through what we need at the edge, and no kidding, determining and figuring out the requirements, then drive us to what we put at the edge. My own personal observation is that we have a tendency to paint things green and throw them out of airplanes early in the process. Yep, we need to be able to paint it green, we need to throw it out of airplanes, and we need to make its interface capable of working with soldiers that have really thick gloves on and a finger like this. Yes, we need to solve that problem. But let's make sure that we optimize the solution to that problem after we understand the foundational problem of what question are we answering with what data that requires what edge compute. See, they teach you when you go to class as a general officer to answer the question that you wanted to answer, not the question that you were asked. So if you saw that shift, now I hope that I addressed the post-quantum question a little bit before I deviated onto helping us, that was one point I wanted to bring out. Help us understand what we mean when we say edge-based AI. Yes, I'm all in. Let's start working towards the actually operationally focused use cases, because understanding the use case drives the whole rest of the .mel PFP chain. Okay, the really fat numbers that are clicking down in front of me just said I've got about time for one more question.
Yes, sir. If a POAM is not the solution for addressing cybersecurity compliance issues...
All right, am I doing push-ups now? Someone calling me out. All right, I'll do 5. See if I got them in me. They don't leave a lot of room to move in this. I wasn't kidding. Can't say it. You can't say it because all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. But, so, given that the POAM is not the solution, what's the rest of the question?
What course of action should units, G6s, and CIOs take to find a solution?
Deferred maintenance program. When you circle X the 5988 Echo, how often is that reviewed by the commander? How about every day before the vehicle, the principal weapon system, is actually fixed? Everyone that's been in command knows that. When you've got a weapons platform that is deadlined, you track it like a hawk. So, yes, there are reasons to defer maintenance. However, just like we do with every other weapons platform, commanders have to review the maintenance. You have to offset the risk. The fact that you didn't patch that server means that you have to look at your logs in a different way, because the fact that you didn't patch it means that you're vulnerable. And you have to address the risk associated with that vulnerability through a different means. I use logging and sensing as an example. Deferred maintenance requires commanders to be back in the critical decision path of determining when you perform maintenance on your critical systems. So, the concept of deferring maintenance, approved. Yes, we must. But put it back into a readiness model, not into an IT POAM. Okay, now it actually turned red and said that I'm over time. I can't thank you enough for inviting me back to Augusta. Thanks to AFCEA for hosting an awesome event. Great to see so many friends. And I am in the joint community, Cyber Defense Command, Defense Information System Agency, 100% dedicated to supporting the warfighter. It is our culture inside a combat support agency and a sub-unified command. Hold me to that. And if you need support from me, you know where to find me. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Please welcome Major General Ryan Janovic to the stage.
It's good to hear General Stanton talk about .mil-PF still. I apologize for being out of uniform. General Miles and I have had a little bit of a calendar redistribution, and I was ill-prepared. But thank you for allowing me to step up. For those of you who 2 years ago weren't at the handover briefing between General Stanton and me, it sounded just like that. So, sir, if you're still in the room, yes, sir. Thanks for the passion, the drive, the connection between what you're doing now and what we're doing within all the work that we did here. And I believe General Crawford is going to recapitulate the last few days in a different way. I thought I might just offer, when we began the week, we promised ourselves in this room, and by extension those watching, some of the things that we were committed to. And the word warfighter has been present throughout. So everything we're doing here should be contributing to outcomes for the commanders that General Stanton talked about, and every panel member and nearly every speaker has talked about. It's hard to measure what did this conference do in that regard. You could get drawn into the wrong ways to measure some of those outcomes. I have a few that I would like to offer. If the energy of CW5s, Chief Warrant Officer 5 is a very peculiar, very important rank. If the energy of CW5s at the end of four days is about talking about, did you see this? Did you talk to them? Did we go press them hard enough? If they're talking about technical problems and finding and identifying solutions, then I think we've done something right. If we have in rooms in this building and rooms down the street, if we have college students all the way to fifth graders, that was my experience yesterday. I wasn't here a lot. I was on the other side from college students writing very important presentation level papers on solving very complicated problems, down to fifth graders, twin young ladies who were in a competition with high schoolers and middle schoolers. If that energy is emblematic of the commitment that this region, that our town, that our partnerships have all brought together, then I think we've done something very, very unique as well. If the questions that were asked of each of the guest speakers and each of the panels were harder, more difficult to answer, and required deft parry of a question into the one that you wanted to answer, then we're doing something right. If we're asking hard questions, harder than they were last year, harder than they needed to be perhaps, then I think we're doing right. Because we're going beyond surface level tension and finding what really matters in the conversations that we aimed to have and we structured to have. Joe Welsh started us off with a level of a portfolio level view. We went through divisions, corps commanders. We paneled nearly every topic attendant with the challenge that we have this morning. Tim Kasiba, the Deputy Director of the National Security Agency, and then a neighbor down the street, both from a headquarters perspective and maybe from a housing perspective, the Director of DISA. So we've gone everywhere in between. General Ray, General Eubank, all that work for them have been in different rooms and breakout sessions. We've demonstrated the greatness of what we set out to do, I believe. We did it in firm partnership with AFCEA yet again as you celebrate 80. We look forward to 81. We also had at the beginning of the week 2 great teammates in the mayor himself and in Dr. Russell Keene from the Augusta University. So if we're asking for a report card, and this is not about platitudes and going home happy, I'm not going to make fun of those of you with bags of squeezy balls. I learned a tough lesson. But if we're asking if we did it right, I think we did. The best measure of that now becomes what our Vice Chief of Staff of the Army has challenged with. There was reference made to this, I think, earlier today, but I'm going to read. Of the 3 things that are at the top of this, what land dominance demands. Number 2, outpace our adversaries. Learn, innovate, and adapt faster by pairing our human ingenuity and judgment with the advanced technologies. It goes on. I think that's a very decent summary of the talent that you were willing to give your own time, bring your team's time, bring your talent into the discussion. To our industry partners who were with us in breakout sessions, out on the floor, and having conversations throughout the week. If we are helping outpace our adversaries to deliver land dominance, then we get an A. An A is never, we shouldn't rest on our laurels. What are we going to do next? In other discussions and partnerships, back here next year, and in the work that happens in our Army, in the .mil-PF, in the portfolio acquisition, in the operational force, what are we going to do next to draw upon the energy that we built here? Don't go away thinking that now, the week is over. This week is over. Next week, we're in contact with the adversary. We've got to develop and deliver to our force, and we've got to continue to challenge ourselves so that we outpace adversaries who are at work in the network, even as we speak. I've been humbled to be a part of this event yet again. I want to thank DJ Scratch for all the walk-up music. And General Crawford, on behalf of the entire CCOE team, I want to thank you and your team for partnering to bring us here together and draw upon and build what I consider to be a little bit of unique magic in this region of the world for some very important topics for our Army in defense of our nation. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Jim Janovic. Please welcome General Crawford back to the stage.
Hey, listen, I know that I'm the last thing standing between you all and getting on the road or completing the rest of the tasks that you had coming into this forum. But I did want to take the opportunity to kind of wrap up very quickly here, as quickly as we can. Paul, once again, great message. Amazing message, and you told us the things that not just that we wanted to hear, but that we needed to hear. So thank you. Thank you for your continued leadership. And again, Ryan, I can't say enough about the partnership we have with your team here. And we're so looking forward to the next couple of ridge lines over and the work that we're going to do together. So thank you for that. Listen, for me, I'll start with gratitude for this group. This is my first what we call flagship event as the 12th president and CEO of AFCEA. And I got to tell you, it's pretty humbling. It's also inspiring as hell when you think about what we've been able to accomplish this week. If you set the Wayback Machine to the planning that went into this. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the numbers just to put things in perspective. We had over 6,400 attendees, and I know it's just a number. We had over 350 exhibitors and sponsors. I know, again, that is just a number. But what those numbers mean and why they matter, this actually represents the most successful, the largest and most dynamic TechNet Augusta that we've ever had. And so I think you all deserve a round of applause for that. It says something about our growth, and not only our growth, but what it also talks about, and it's a great example of this community's commitment, but also, more importantly to us, because we spend a lot of time talking about the future, it's a great example of our future potential. And so I thought that I would share that with you. Ryan Janovic told us to do a couple of things on day one. He told us to go talk to young soldiers. So we had an opportunity to spend some time talking with Captain Roberts, who showed up here before as an aide-de-camp a few years ago. She attended TechNet Augusta this year and returned, knowing the connections, knowing the insights, and knowing the relationships, and had a totally different perspective in terms of what this event, not just a conference, but what this forum means to her growth, to her ability to network, and to her ability to get mentorship from you, from this audience. I had the opportunity, and I can't resist it when I see him, to spend some time with ROTC cadets yesterday from the Department of War Senior Military College Cyber Institute program. Folks, if you hadn't had an opportunity to look in the eyes of ROTC cadets, especially those that are in STEM in a long time, I'm not saying it's going to change your life, but I got to tell you, you'll leave uplifted, you'll leave inspired, and you'll leave pretty deadgum enthusiastic about our future. And so the thing that I'll tell you, and Ryan, we appreciate the challenge, behind every one of these policy discussions, and I know it's not lost on this audience, behind every architecture diagram, behind every acquisition timeline, and every capability gap is a soldier, a civilian, a teammate, and an actual mission and a purpose, all right? So one of the other things that we also heard this week is we heard, and it was pretty fascinating if you were keeping score, we heard a common set of words and phrases from leaders across the operational, tactical, and industrial-based communities. And I'll just play back just a couple of those for you. We heard that the tactical edge actually exposes things that a lab cannot. I thought that was a pretty interesting observation. We heard that we must weaponize speed, but that speed without control actually creates risk. We heard that relevance, because there's been a lot of discussion about relevance, but we heard that relevance actually has a shelf life, right? And we also heard from a CEO, and I agree, having spent 6 years on the other side after I took the uniform off, but he said, look, our military should commit to understanding a little bit, not a lot, but as you're engaging with industry, we should commit to understanding a little bit about business, all right? And so that you can play a little bit of offense and you're not just on the defense when you're having these conversations, all right? We also heard that we've got to prioritize outcomes over process. And then another great observation from Jeff Ray, I believe, was that AI is simply the aggregation of information that creates animation. There was a pretty lively discussion around that. And then last but not least, we heard Tim Kasiba talk about the fact that it's all about trusted relationships. And there was one more that I thought, Chris Eubank, we're going to get a T-shirt that says that because we were talking about the support that he needs. And he said, look, success in our endeavors is going to take a village. And as he's looking at the audience, he said, and you are that village. So this is an us problem, not a he problem or a she problem or a you problem. These are ours to solve. So our speakers actually approach these outcomes and these themes from a different perspective. But again, I thought it was very interesting that their messages were remarkably consistent because what that signifies to me is there's alignment, all right? We're not saying that we got all problems solved, but in order to get after the things that Paul talked about, that every leader that stepped on the stage talked about, we're going to have alignment so that we can get to this other thing, which is prioritization, given resources, right? And so if there's one big idea that I hope that we all carry forward, it's that trusted relationships. I could be really, really wrong on this, but I believe that whether you're running a business or you have requirements that need to be solved by a business owner, by corporate America, the key to success is actually trusted relationships. And one of the things that I think that this organization that I'm honored and privileged to lead does well, as good as anybody else in the world, given that we've been around, and you got to get pretty good to be around for 80 years. But one of the things that I think we do well is we create the environment where these trusted relationships can actually happen. And so I offer that as something for you to think about. And I can't leave the stage because I'm a Steeler fan without quoting a Steeler coach. I think it was Mike Tomlin who actually said that, listen, if you want extraordinary outcomes, then you've got to seek and you've got to develop extraordinary relationships. So ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you all very much for your time, for your treasure, for your energy, and most importantly, for your ideas this week. Be well, and I will see you next year. Thank you.